What's up, everybody? Today we're going to discuss the famous Java+moss. As you can see, it can handle a wide range of parameters. You can have it in Tanganyika tanks with 9 pH. You can have it in high-tech tanks with low pH, soft acidic water. It's not very demanding, and that's why I like it, and that, of course, is why it's famous. Many beginners can succeed growing moss walls. It's very easy just to get some thread and thread it onto some driftwood, or of course you can use super glue. It's very forgiving. Like any moss, it does prefer cooler waters, but it is hardy, so you can have it in warmer waters, and of course it's going to thrive. It's just that if you want to have it show off its optimum growth patterns, once again, you want to have it in cooler water temperatures. We're talking about the ideal situation for these mosses. And of course, when you're putting it on driftwood, you just always want to make sure that you thin it out, get it as thin as possible, just so the bottom half doesn't rot. Like I mentioned with Physidens is a little more forgiving just because it doesn't really grow on top of itself or branch out. It kind of just grows in long strands, but then they all grow at the same rate, so then it kind of looks bushy and looks pillowy. But with Java+moss, you really do want to thin it out, or over time, sometimes the bottom half can become rotten and it'll rot. And as well, if you thin it out, it just helps the moss hold on to the wood and the rock a lot quicker, a lot faster, saves you a lot of time, a lot of anguish. But what's nice about Java+moss, of course, is it is relatively cheap. You can, it's inexpensive, basically. You can find it anywhere. Everyone has it. Tons of breeders use it. Guppy breeders all the way to Tanganyika breeders. Anything, any kind of fish. A lot of people prefer to use Java+moss just so the fry can hide in the moss. And that's really it, guys. You're going to see me here in a minute trimming some of the Java+moss. I'll show you how I trim it. You don't necessarily need to trim it down, to the bare bones. Like, when you see people trim HC baby tears, or if you see anyone trim a carpet, sometimes to keep HC healthy, you do need to trim it to the bare bones. But when it comes to mosses, if you started out by planting them, in thin clumps instead of thick clumps, you're not going to have to really trim it to the bare bones, basically. You could just trim half of it off. And then if you want to go ahead and stick it to driftwood, you can use thread if you want. And here in a minute, you'll see me using some super glue. I just prefer to use the super glue. And if you're doing it outside the water, it does make it a lot easier to plant. Because if you're going to plant to the driftwood and it's above water, you don't really need to put the super glue onto the moss. When I was talking about the Physidens, I was putting the super glue onto the moss because I was thinking about how I do it when the driftwood is underwater. Of course, if the driftwood is above water, you just put the super glue on the wood. And then that's way easier. You put the moss onto the wood, and there you go. Mosses, I think a lot of people have a hard time with them sometimes because they can get a lot of algae growth in them. They're prone to algae growth because overall they are slow-growing plants, and they do their job quite well, which is collecting nutrients. So they collect a lot of detritus, therefore a lot of moss is going to have algae growth for those two reasons. But I think one of the biggest issues why people are having such a problem with Physidens and with Java+moss, or even with the Ricardia, is your temperature's too high. I'd say the number one thing that matters more than anything is the temperature. People are saying, well, do I dose? Well, of course, any aquarium with plants should have some kind of fertilizers. And of course, if you're going to have Java ferns, Anubias, and moss, they're going to want to have nutrients in the water column. Java+moss is so hardy, though, that it's going to grow anywhere. It's going to grow in hard water. Hard water has ample amounts of basic minerals. It'll go crazy in a Tanganyika tank. It's not demanding. But if you want it to get really bushy, all I can tell you is to put it thinly, spread it thinly onto a piece of driftwood, and then trim it weekly. Trim it every time at a water change. Turn your pumps off. You know, when you turn your pumps off, the moss clippings don't go everywhere. You can easily net them up. And then as well, have high light so it gets really dense. Have cooler temperatures. It just makes it happier. It makes them darker in color, and it just helps them grow thicker and more dense. They get kind of spindly and thin in warm water. So having the high light with the cooler water really keeps them nice and bushy and thick and dense. And, you know, when it comes to algae, I guess it's a good indicator, because if your moss has algae, then your tank probably isn't very well balanced. So you're going to need to work on your husbandry skills. There's really no secret in silver bullet. We're always going to continue to learn in this hobby, and it's really just about experience and practicing all the time. So you're going to have good, consistent. One of the secret bullets is consistency. You're going to need to be consistent with your trimming, with your fertilizers. Once a tank gets balanced, which I'm referring to the substrate as well. I'm referring to the bacteria beds in the substrate as well as the root mass of the plants. That's, you know, basically what I mean when I talk about balance. You can go longer without doing water changes. You can miss days dosing. It gets easier for the tank to maintain itself, and the plants will grow more quickly. That's why people like Amano or ADA, they put the bacteria and the starter additives into the substrate because it really jump starts your tank. But like I've said before, they aren't necessary. But what that's doing is it's maturing your substrate a lot quicker. And anyone with experience in this hobby knows that the more mature your substrate is, the better everything else will work out. Your carpets will carpet quicker. Everything will work out. And the reason is because the enzymes and the bacteria and everything are metabolizing the nutrients, and it makes it easier for the plants to assimilate. It makes it easier for the roots to take up. And then, of course, the enzymes being released by the plant roots are more mature because you have a more dense root mass. So having tons of roots and having tons of bacteria in the substrate make everything else 10 times easier. That's really the only thing I can tell you. But that's basically it. I hope you liked this episode. The next episode, I don't really know what I'm going to do yet. And what does it really matter? We know it'll be some kind of moss, a liverwort. And I did mention that I am going to include bladderworts. And bladderworts are not bryophytes, but the name is similar to liverwort, so I'm going to include bladderworts. And in the future, I will talk about UG. Maybe next time I will talk about Utricularia+graminifolia. Until next time, keep your sleeves wet. Peace out.